Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us back up here at Sunrise Lakes, and today what we're going to do is basically just run through how we're going to try and tackle this peg and catch a nice net of silvers. Obviously the matches aren't on at the moment, so it's not really so much of a match practice, it's more a case of just getting bites, because obviously the past few weeks the weather's been terrible, most lakes have been frozen, so as I say we've come up here to try and get a few bites. What we're going to do today, as I say, is target silverfish, fishing a couple of different lines and basically trying to suss out where the fish are going to be. It's only defrosting the last week as this lake, so it's hard to say sort of what level the fish are going to be at, so I've got quite a bit of kit set up just to cover the different depths and also plenty of different options as to how to feed for the silvers that we're going to try and target today. So I'll quickly run you through the lines that I'm going to fish. I've got a 10.5 metre line which is just up to the reed bed in front of me, and in all fairness today that's where I'm going to concentrate my efforts, is around this point of the reed bed that's in front of me. So I'm going to feed one line at 10.5 metres. That I'm going to start off with just a loose cup of ground bait and start loose feeding a few pinkies and maggots and casters, that sort of thing, over the top, try and get the fish shallow on there hopefully later on. And then I'm going to put in a long line. It's something you'll have seen me do before, where I've put in a long line here but separated them by one section. So I'm going to put in 5 balls at 13 metres for the skimmers, which is a nice sort of proper traditional skimmer mix, and then 2 balls shorter with more of a roach type mix, the same mix that I'll feed on that 10.5 metre line. So I'm basically fishing 10.5, 11.5 and 13 metres today. The depth out there is completely uniform, so all 6 rigs that I've got set up will cover every single area of the peg. So as I say, it's given me plenty of different options as to where to target the fish. So in terms of the ground bait that I'm going to feed, for the roach side of things, I've just got a nice mix here of equal parts Census Lake, Frenzied Hemp Seed Black and Silver X Roach Black. Nice active mix, not squeezed too hard, and I've just filled that with dead pinkies, quite a few casters and a bit of hemp seed. As I say, nice and simple for targeting roach. It's a good safe bet, is that. On the longer line, I've made up a slightly different mix, which is much heavier, much denser, with a bit of fish meal in it. In this I've just got equal parts Census River, so it's going to take a long time to break down, which is what I want on that line, and Swim Stim Amino Black. So a bit of fish meal in there but not too much, and these balls I've squeezed a bit harder. In those I've just got dead maggots, a few dead pinkies and a few micro pellets. Again, not too many micros just in case carp settle over it, but we'll run through that as I start fishing in terms of what happens if I do end up hooking a carp or two on one of the lines. It just means I can switch between them and try and sort of pick fish off where the carp have disturbed them. So as I say, on that long line at 13 metres it's going to be 5 balls. The shorter line at 11.5, I'm just going to put in 2 balls of the roach mix, and then as I say, on that shorter line it's just going to be a cupful of the loose ground bait. I'll run through the rigs as I start fishing, but the ones that I'm going to start on are basically these two, which are, in all fairness, my standard bread punch rigs. And I expect the 4x16s version I'll probably catch most fish on today. But I've got an array of rigs, as I say, set up. Now these two, which I'm expecting to catch the bulk of the fish on early, are rigs for bombing the bait down to the bottom and presenting it quick and fishing quick. Usually what's happened on here from experience is you put in the bait, the fish will rush to it, they'll go straight to it on the bottom, and you want to bomb a bait down as quickly as you can to catch them. So as I say, these are basically my bread punch rigs. So at the top end we've just got a number 5 elastic, 012 mainline, which is the same for all the rigs. And these I've just got Census SA2s, a 414s and a 416s. I've also got a 418 set up in the same, just in case the wind picks up, with a number 6 elastic. That's something that I'll go to if I think there's more skimmers in the peg or there's a bit of tow on the lake. The bottom end for them is all the same. I've just got a bulk and then 2 number 10 droppers. So nice and positive, as I say, getting the bait down really quick and fishing nice and fast, because I'm hoping to try and get a nice weight in the net in the first hour. Hook lengths on all the rigs are the same, but just with slightly different hook sizes. 095 Drennan Suplex fluorocarbon, and then black gammas. On the lighter rigs I've got set with 20s, the medium rigs more of an 18s, and then the heavier rigs I've got a 16s hook. So ideally, if it's a case that I'm struggling for bites, I'll go on the lighter rig with a smaller hook and the shot slightly more spread. And if there's plenty of fish there, then I'll go up to the 416s or even the 418s. So what we'll do now is we'll get the peg fed and start fishing. Right, so that's the lines fed now. As I say, I've put 5 balls on that 13 metre skimmer line, 2 balls of the roach mix, a section shorter, and then at 10.5 metres I've just put in a loose pot with a bit of hemp and a few loose casters. So the first rig I'm going to pick up, I'm actually going to start on the 416s. So basically starting as positive as I can. I can pick up the right one. And hopefully the fish will have followed that ground bait straight to the bottom. So hook bait wise, I'm just going to go for a single red maggot tipped with a pinky. So last year in the Winter League, that seemed to be the best bait by far and a good compromise. Catch everything, but not too small that are just going to catch sort of the fish of about an ounce or so. So all I'm doing is just bringing the bulk under the float and then just dropping the float on top of it, and you can see how quick these pencil style floats settle. There we go, I've got a small fish on straight away. Nice little roach, about 2 ounces or so. So as you can see, rather than fishing a strung rig, sort of like a 412s or 414s or whatever, with a 416s bulk rig like this, I'm able to get the bait straight to the bottom where the fish are going to be feeding initially and catch them much quicker. The other side of it as well, with these sort of bulk rigs, especially a pencil style float, it's just how quick you can get into the fish as well. So you don't tend to miss many bites when you're fishing like this. I'm just going to lift and drop that rig. And again, what I've decided to do, as you can see, is just target this one area of the peg around the point of these reeds, but basically putting in effectively 3 lines in that area. And what that means is if carp do come into the peg, the fish have got somewhere to go. I'm keeping them in a general area in my peg, and hopefully through the day I can just pick fish off from each of those areas. So there's a bit of ground bait in every area, pretty much a section at a time out for 3 sections. So if the fish do get disturbed for whatever reason, whether it's because I'm catching or whether there's a carp in the peg, it means that they've got somewhere to go that isn't too far away. And all I have to do is add a section and I can be right on top of them. There we go, that's another fish on now. That's a slightly better stamp roach, just about be able to swing this one. And these are the sort of stamp fish that we're looking for on that ground bait to start with. So say if we were fishing a strung rig, I'd expect to catch fish of probably half that size. Right, and there's another fish on already. So about 5 minutes in and we've had 3 fish now. But it's taken a little bit longer than I thought it might do to catch. It's a nice stamp roach, we'll net that one. So I'm already thinking the fish might be sat a bit higher up in the water. And we'll give it another half hour before I make that decision, but because the lake's been frozen for the past, well, saying that, it's defrosted probably around Tuesday, something like that, and it's now Sunday. All that cold water could well have gone to the bottom, which might keep the fish sat a bit higher up in the water because we've had such a sudden spike in air temperatures. It might be the case that the fish just don't want to go down to feed as readily as they usually would do. So I'm already thinking about how the next hour or two of the session's going to pan out. But we'll give them sort of half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, to just see if they do go down to the ground bait and settle. But if it's slow going getting bites, then I'll look at trying to bring the fish up in the water, or getting them, or start feeding them fishing sort of mid-depth. Which again, I've got that covered with a couple of nice light Chianti rigs. But obviously by doing that, then you run the risk of catching a smaller stamp of fish as well. So my plan's going to be, if I do make the decision to start trying to catch them at sort of half depth or 3/4 depth, whatever it might be, I'm going to start loose feeding with maggots, just to try and draw as many fish into the area as I can do. And then if it turns out the stamp's too small, I'll switch to loose feeding casters. Well, that's another fish on, only a small fish this time. And these are the smaller stamp roach that I'm on about that we could end up catching shallow. Again, it's all well and good getting bites, but ideally want to be catching sort of the fish of 2-3 ounces if we can do, if not 5 or 6. What's already noticeable as well is just how slow the bite's developing. Getting a bite and they're just very gradually taking the float under, and the fish are really cold. So that's a small one that's taking it on the drop there. It's an even smaller stamp fish, that. Ideally those are the ones that we want to try and avoid. Now again, I've always got the option of switching the hook bait to a caster, but if I can do, I prefer to catch on a maggot and a pinky because it's just that bit much more durable. Same again, it's once you get used to fishing these sort of rigs, it's quite straightforward, just dragging the bulk across the top of the water until it gets in line with the far bank marker, and then just dump the rig in. I say these floats that I use, the Sensus SA2s, they sit pretty much immediately. As I've mentioned, these are the rigs that I use for my bread punch fishing, which is basically the same sort of method as to what I'm doing today, where you just want to bomb the bait down to the bottom as quickly as possible and then get a nice clean strike. So rather than using a bodied float, they just come out of the water that much cleaner, these do. So what we'll do now is we'll keep on fishing this for the next sort of half hour of the session until we get to about the hour mark, something like that. And then I'll make a decision whether to start loose feeding this line and what to start loose feeding it with. And then when I am doing the loose feeding on this short 10.5 metre line, that's when I'll move on to fishing me 11.5 or 13 metre lines. Right, so we just had an F1 on this 11.5 metre line over those 2 balls of the roach mix. And it's been a couple of minutes there. I've just had a couple of tiny little indications, but it definitely seems like they're unsettled. So, like I said at the start of the video, this is why I split these 2 lines by just a section. So without changing anything, all I've got to do is just push the pole out to the full 13 metres, and then I'm sat over my fish meal mix. So we'll just see if we can get a bite on this before I go on to that shallow line, which I've been feeding for sort of 45 minutes to an hour now. There we go, that's an indication of the fish straight away. So where I might have been sat at 11.5 metres struggling for a bite because the peg's been unsettled, I'm able to just go to 13 metres and I've caught one straight away. Not a massive fish, but a nice stamp roach, this one. So I think what we'll do while we let those two lines settle after, as I say, I've had that F1, I've been feeding this short line where I'm fishing shallow, so let's just have a quick look at the rigs before I ever go on it. So they're not your sort of ultra shallow rigs that you'll see us using on here in summer, or fishing for silvers in summer, but they're pretty much the same. All I've got on these, I've just got two set up, both pretty much identical apart from a couple of little differences. At the top end I've just got a number 4 elastic set nice and soft. Again, if we're fishing shallow, I don't want fish splashing and flashing on the surface, so I just want to be able to hook them, ship back as quick as I can, and then swing them in if possible. So number 4 is perfect for that. Quite a long line between pole float and tip. Again, that just means that I'm not going to tangle the rig throwing it in and out of the water. With some back shot there, that just helps me get control of these light floats. Both floats are Preston Chiantis. This one's a 3B8s, the others are 4B10s. Then I've just got strung shot about sort of 6 inch intervals down to the hook length, which again is 5 inches of 095 fluorocarbon to a 20 gamma black. So this one's a little bit lighter, and I've got this set at 3 foot. And the other one, it's exactly the same, as I say, with a slightly heavier float, 410s. And I've just got that set at 4 foot, and instead of number 12 droppers on this, I've got number 11 strung through the rig. Same sort of spacing, but as I say, just for fishing that little bit deeper. So that one will probably settle about a foot off bottom or so. Just quickly, I'll show you one other rig that I've got set up, which will do the same thing, but this is more if I go onto the caster later on. This is, again, a strung rig for fishing all the way through to the deck on that line. But it's slightly beefed up as this, just in case we're catching bigger roach or even a large perch down to the bottom. So number 6 elastic in the top end of this one, again 012 mainline, and then a slightly larger sensors float with a wire stem, 0.3 of a gram, nice fine hollow bristle, and then on this one it's just strung 10s through the rig. And then finished off with a size 16 black gamma 2095 fluorocarbon. As I say, that's one that I'll probably pick up later in the session, or if I feel there's some better perch on the bottom, but I'm more likely to use that when I'm fishing with the caster. But these two are the ones that I'll use for catching the roach, and maybe the odd rud or skimmer at sort of half depth and slightly above. So I'll get a maggot on this, ship out and see if we can get a bite quickly. Right, so I've just put on a maggot hook bait and I'm just going to ship out now. So because of how this peg's sort of set up in front of me, those reeds are pretty much at the limit of what I can go to at 10.5 metres, and that's where I put the initial pot of ground bait in, the distance. So all the bait I'm feeding, I'm just fishing short of that or feeding short of that. So maybe the odd 1 or 2 maggots might just drop just shy of the reeds. There we go, that's a bite and a fish on straight away. But I'm hoping that I can catch them just that little bit closer. Nice little roach, about 2 ounces or so, that one. But because I've been feeding that for an hour, hopefully they should have confidence now, and that's probably why I've got a bite straight away. So I'm just coming half a section short of the reeds, and that's where I'm laying the rig in. So I've started on this 410s rig, which is set at 4 foot. There's another bite and another fish on. If I start missing bites, then that's why I've got the other rig set at 3 foot. Now these are the stamper fish that I'm trying to avoid if possible, these sort of roach of an ounce or so. So if these become a problem, that's when I'll switch to loose feeding casters on this line. You can tell that fish is probably taking the bait around 3 foot deep there, going off how the float was looking and the angle it was sat at when it went under. But considering how quickly I'm getting the bites, I'm going to up the feed a little bit. That was an indication on the drop again. So I'm going to start loose feeding instead of sort of 10s and 15s, about 20 maggots or so now every time. There's another bite and another fish on. Just pulled out of that one, felt like a slightly better stamp. The maggot's just doubled over the hook point. And if I start pulling out more fish, or the peg seems to be really solid, then I'll uprate the hook size to an 18 or even a 16. See, with the number 4 elastic I can give it a good firm strike to pick up all the loose line, but I'm not risking pulling out a fish too much. There we go, that's another nice stamp roach, that. But it's already quite clear to see I'm getting much cleaner bites when I'm fishing through the water like this and fishing shallow. And equally I'm definitely catching quicker. So I've had 3 fish in probably the time it's taken me to catch one on the bottom. So when we're shallow fishing like this, the main thing is just get into a rhythm of feeding. So what I don't want to do is feed too regular with too little amounts and bring the fish right up in the water. Ideally I just want to try and get a good quantity of bait going in fairly regularly, but I'm not trying to get them sort of feeding in the top sort of 12 inches of water or 6 inches of water like we would do in summer. And just had one nick the bait on the way down there. So obviously in the meantime those long ground bait lines are getting even more time to settle. And because I've put quite a bit of bait out there, as I say, 5 balls on the longest line and 2 balls shorter of that, so it's 7 balls of ground bait, so it shouldn't take the fish, or they shouldn't eat through it really quickly. And that's biting another one. It's just dropped off that one. There's another small stamp fish. Let's see, if I get sort of 4 or 5 of those, it's just dropped off as that one. Get 4 or 5 of those in a row, that's when I'll look to switch to feeding casters. Also, by loose feeding like this, draws plenty of fish into the area, and if I feel like it's worth doing later on, I can always put another ball of ground bait in and then just hopefully pin the fish to the bottom then. Just had a small fish nick the bait off there. So what I'm actually going to do now is hook the maggot like I do when I'm whip fishing. It's effectively hooking it twice, so hooking it quite lightly through the lip and then just sort of folding the maggot over and nicking it again. So that should hopefully keep the bait on for a bit longer. And if I can start catching consistently, it should hopefully mean that I can catch multiple fish on the same hook bait. There we go, that's a fish on straight away. It's really clear now that we're catching far, far quicker. Like this fishing shallow. See there, the maggots still on the hook, barely damaged. Get straight back out there and try and get another bite. As opposed to when we're fishing on the bottom where we've missed quite a few bites. We're missing a lot fewer by catching them shallow like this. It definitely seems to be the case that the fish don't want to be sat hard on the bottom today. I've just missed 2 bites in quick succession there, so I think they've come a bit shallower. So straight away I'm going to pick up that 3-foot rig. So same again when I'm hooking the maggot, just hooking it through the lip, turning it and then just hooking it again. And I might be able to get away with scaling up to a size 18 hook as opposed to a 20. So what I'm going to try and do now is settle into a good rhythm of just putting in one lot of feed and then waiting for a bite. As I said earlier, I don't want them coming right up in the water to the point where they're a foot deep or so. It's a smaller stamp fish, that one. Ideally we want to be catching them around half depth, which, as I say, the peg today is probably about 5.5 foot deep, something like that, so 3 foot's ideal. So there we go, this feels like a better stamp fish. It's a better stamp roach, this one. And if we can start catching these fish of sort of 3-4 ounce shallow, we can really start to do a good weight. Again, it seems the bites as well are much cleaner fishing at 3 foot as opposed to 4 foot. Again, nice good pouch of maggots before I ship out. And then just drag the rig across. And float's just absolutely sailed away there. There we go, we've got another one on. Get another one of these stamp roach. Well, because I'm starting pretty much bang on in the middle of the feed, I've still got half a section up to the reeds, so if it turns out that the fish look like they're backing off for whatever reason, I can just go a bit tighter to the reeds, and occasionally that's where you've got a chance of snaring a better stamp fish. Just pulled out of one there. It definitely seems to be the case though that the fish don't want to be on the bottom feeding as yet. Just missed a couple of little indications there. Could be from small fish. There we go, that's a better stamp one on already. It's just come off that. Might have been an F1. So I think what we'll do now is we'll crack on with fishing shallow for the next hour or so, and then we might look at rotating the lines, changing it round a bit, have a look over the ground bait lines, and by that point it might be the case that I've switched to feeding caster. Right, so an update now as we're getting into sort of the last bit of the session. Probably still got about 2 hours or so left. But what I've decided to do now is, basically we were catching quite well shallow, and then suddenly the fish just seemed to switch off, and it seemed like bites were getting hard to come by and the stamp fish was getting considerably smaller. So what I've decided to do then is basically switch, as I mentioned earlier in the video, to loose feeding casters on this line. So what I've done is I've gone out long, caught a couple of fish out there, just fishing over the top of the ground bait, and giving it sort of half an hour of just constant loose feeding on this line. I've also put in another pot of ground bait full of casters. And pretty much straight away after I've gone on it, I've caught 2 better stamp roach. So I'm still feeding quite large quantities of caster, probably 20 casters every single drop in. And what I've also done is shorten the line down on this rig, just to make me a bit quicker on hitting the bites. And there we go, that's another quality fish on now. And it's amazing the difference that it's made to switch to feeding casters as opposed to loose feeding maggots on this line. It's pretty much like the stamper roach that I was catching earlier on when I was loose feeding maggots on this line, sort of petered out as the session wore on, and then by switching to casters I've just brought them back into the peg. It's a nice, looks like a bream, roach bream hybrid that time. So I'm still fishing a single maggot, just as I mentioned earlier on, sort of double hooking the maggot to make sure it stays on even if I miss a bite or two. But shortening that line down's definitely made a big difference. And so I've only probably got about 8 inches of line between pole float and tip now, so I'm just fishing tight to the hook bait. Same again there, just the tiniest lift and that's fish on. Feels like a much better stamp fish. Just try and keep it out of the reeds to my left. Bit awkward shipping back here because I'm having to ship back to my right next to a bush. So it just means that when I'm getting close to the top kit, the fish are just coming a bit nearer. It's a lovely stamp roach that. Coming a bit close to that inside cover there. But those are the stamp roach that we're after. We've already had one of those today. But hopefully that switch to caster will get a few more interest as the session wears on. It's a lovely stamp roach, is that one. See, maggot's a bit bust, but I'm not too worried about that. I think there's enough competition in the peg. What was noticeable as well though, as I say, I was getting towards the end of that stint where I was loose feeding maggots on this line. I was missing quite a few bites, but I did end up hooking quite a few really small rudd. And I think they were causing the problems. So I think by switching to caster, which is a bait that falls a little bit quicker than a maggot, I think it's just avoiding the attention of those rudd a bit more. What I may well try is that 0.3 strung rig as well at some point. Just see if there's a few better roach nearer the bottom. Yeah, I think we'll just have to change that hook bait. Again, where I can avoid changing the hook bait for a fresh one just to speed the process up, I will do. There's been points today where I've been able to catch on a really badly bust maggot, and equally points where I've had to fish a nice, fresh, clean hook bait. But that just all comes down to how much competition you've got in your peg at any given time. So if there's loads of fish in the peg, then they'll pretty much hit anything you can put in front of them. It's a bit fiddly double hooking the maggot like that. But it makes a massive difference, especially when your hook bait's getting smashed up by these small rudd. And definitely today the most fish we've caught have been on this 3-foot rig. Just strung 12s down the line. But at times we've had to chop and change it, but it seems like the fishing on the deck's just been, by comparison, really poor. And I think a lot of that's down to, obviously, as the ice has melted, all that cold water settled on the bottom, and the fish just don't want to be down there. It's like a smaller fish on here. Again, since I've been loose feeding casters instead of maggots, that's the sort of the smaller size that I've been catching, about 2 to 3 ounces. It's made a massive difference as that. And the reason why, when I decided to change what I was doing on this line, why I put a ball of ground bait in, was just to try and get a few skimmers or roach on the, or better stamp roach on the bottom, and just give them another area to graze over as I was loose feeding. And it also gives me another option that if I do have to fish on the bottom, that I can do. A couple of bites missed there. So at times I will switch and change to fishing a caster hook bait, but again, by feeding or fishing a maggot in the way that I'm doing at the moment, which means that if I'm getting pestered with small fish like this, they're not going to bust the hook bait as easily. As you can see, it's just a dead quick process of unhooking the fish and shipping back out. Nice little rud that time. So I think it's these that have been causing us a lot of the missed bites. So what I've had to do to counter that is cut down the regularity of feeding. So when I started initially loose feeding on this line with the maggot, it's probably feeding sort of twice every 30 seconds or so. Whereas as they've come into the peg and been causing me a lot of missed bites, that's when I've ended up increasing the level of feed but decreasing the regularity, just to try and keep a few fish further down in the water column. There we go, that's another nice fish on. It doesn't take long to build a weight catching roach of that sort of size. Again, that maggot's still good for another fish. Points I've been able to catch sort of 8 or 10 fish on a single maggot today. It's a bit sort of like when you're bleak fishing almost. Same sort of way of hooking the bait so it doesn't get damaged. It's fantastic fishing is this for the end of February. Considering only sort of about 5 or 6 days ago this lake was frozen solid. Right, so I've just had a quick switch over there after trying shallow on the caster to a bulk rig. So went through my 3-foot rig, struggling for bites. Went off onto the 4-foot rig and didn't get anything of a good size. So I've just switched onto the 418s rig with double caster and it's buried straight away. Now, it could be an F1 this, but I'm hoping it isn't. No, it's a nice perch. He's trying to snag me under my own platform. There we go. First proper bonus fish of the day, that one. Easily over £2 that. Lovely fish on the double caster, that one. As you can see, a cracking perch, that. Just nicked right in the corner of the mouth. And that's a proper stamp fish. Right, so we're into the last couple of minutes of the session now. It's been quite interesting the past sort of hour and a half, something like that, because I've had to chop and change between pretty much all my rigs on this one line in front of us to the reeds. Still feeding the same with casters, probably putting about 20 or so in every single time. But I've gone through all the rigs and pretty much all the depths as well, just to try and keep in touch with the fish. I've ended up catching a few nice roach on double caster on the bottom on the 0.3 of a gram rig with strung 10s through it, and it just seemed like bites were drying up on that. So I ended up going to the 4-foot rig, getting a couple of fish on that, and then ended up catching a small run of fish shallow, again about sort of 2.5 to 3 foot deep. And generally they were quite a good stamp. They were, you know, a couple of nice roach as well. And then they just seem to have backed off again. So I've tried close to the reeds and gone back down through the depths and ended up going back onto the bottom with the strung rig with double caster. Ended up snaring a couple of better roach there as well. Also in the last couple of hours I've had a nice perch about £2 again, something different, where I've just put on double caster on this 4B18's rig, which I'm trying again, and just put it straight over the top of the loose fed caster line. There's another bite there and a small fish. And that was for the same reason that, as I said earlier, where I'd just stopped getting bites shallow or they weren't feeding quite as confidently. So I just bombed a double caster hook bait down there, and probably 5 seconds in, float went under and there was a nice £2 perch on. So it's been really interesting. The fish it's been amazing how quickly they've sort of switched off at different depths and then switched on at others. But I think what we'll do is just try and catch one more fish to finish on and then call it a day at that. But it's been really interesting today. We've only probably fished 5 hours in total, but I certainly think we've got a good weight in the net. I say the two lines that I fed long, the 11.5 and the 13 metre lines, don't really seem to have produced today. As if the fish didn't really want to settle on them. I've had a few fish over them, but not that many, and it's not been consistent either. I mean, things start to seem to come together when we got the fish feeding shallow on maggots over this 10.5 metre line, and it's pretty much this one line that I've ended up working most of the day. Occasionally when it's gone quiet, that's when I've gone back out to 13 metres and caught a couple of fish. but nearly all the fish today have come on this 10.5 metre line. But it's been interesting today, considering I've had to try fishing at 3 foot and 4 foot shallow, even caught shallow as 2 foot at times. And then when it's gone quiet, I've had to go onto the bottom and taken a couple of better fish there as well on double caster. There's a little indication on the double caster there now. And another fish on. So I think we'll probably call this the last fish of the session. Just taking this one on double caster, the nice positive 4B18s rig. And it'll be interesting to see what we've caught today. The start of the session, I said I'd hope for sort of 20 pound. I think that'd be an excellent weight if we've got that today, but not sure how close we've got. But a nice little roach to finish off, about sort of 2-3 ounces. Pop him in the net and we'll get him out, have a look and weigh him in. Right, so there we go, that's our final net of fish. We've really had to work for them today, it's not been easy, but as you can see we've caught a real variety in terms of stamp and equally species today. We've had one bonus fish today, being that perch, probably about £2 or so. Lovely fish, that one. We've even snuck out a golden rudd as well. No proper skimmers, couple sort of hand size, but mainly roach in that net for £19 even. So we've had a good day session, a good day sport here. Like I say, we've had to chop and change through the day. We've had good runs shallow at spells, caught a few nice fish on double caster like that perch, and equally had a few on the bottom over ground bait, but that's not really produced today. So it's been a fantastic day. As always, like when we're up here, we've got the permission off the owners to use the net so we can show you our final catch. But it's been a lovely day sport here, and nice change after the past few weeks of struggling to get a bite. So it's a good £19 bag is that, so we'll get him popped back now. But as always, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on that next episode.